Okay, so I've just switched on record. You'll be pleased to hear I didn't record any of that in respect of your
What
privacy.
about your check-in, Michael?
Oh, yes, I'll check in. Um, it's busy, but it's interesting. A couple of times, a couple of comments that you've just made about the fact that we're actually going to look at time management tonight. One of the tools we're going to look at. Um, I'm finding that while life is probably just as busy as it was, say, 12 months ago, I'm coming up to 12 months in my role with Comlink, which is sort of 3 days a week. And I'm kind of doing a bit of a review of where on earth I think I am with that company relative to the other stuff that I'm doing. And I'm trying to give you some examples in the new tools format of what's actually going on with entrepreneurs. So I'll sort of spill my guts a little bit later when it comes to time management, but I'm finding that the tools are actually really useful for this, for time management. How much of my head goes to Comlink, how much overlaps with Edgeware, how much is Edgeware elsewhere, and how much is private, how much is me time and all of that. I think all those things can get stirred around really easily, and often in my life that's been the case. There's just been so much to do that my whole life has been stamping out bushfires or scrub fires, spot fires before they turn into bushfires. Whereas now I feel I'm kind of, if not on top of it, then I'm managing it. So I'm feeling pretty good about all of that. I'm loving this. I'm loving the Intrapreneurs program. I'm loving some of the stuff that's happening at Comlink with the Vitality Village. We're at a stage where the interior design is happening and we're starting to imagine what it's like to actually work in this place rather than all the politics and hassle and finances of building the thing. And that's pretty exciting because that's what I do. I work with people. So I'm feeling pretty good. Looking forward to tonight, which is going to be a pretty big one, folks. It's Penny Mill can't be here, but I'm glad that we're recording this because there's quite a lot of content tonight, and I don't want to waste or spend too much time at the beginning just sort of chewing the fat. I'd like to jump straight in and complete the tools that Amanda introduced us last week. But just a couple of quick comments. Like, Steph, if you starting to ask yourself questions like, am I repeating myself? That's exactly the sort of thing gas groups are for. So it's about getting on the phone and talking to somebody or sitting down with coffee, and because they'll have questions like that and you'll have ideas for them. Sometimes a bit of overlap is useful. Asking the same question 2 or 3 different ways can be useful because you can shed light on them in different ways. Looking at it from the point of view, your point of view of a supplier, looking at it from the customer's point of view as the consumer, can actually give you slightly different nuanced angles. Jay, the bring a next gen idea is just music to my ears. Not only because it's a good idea, but because it's evidence that you're actually thinking like an entrepreneur, or you're thinking like an intrapreneur. And ultimately, the value to you and the value to Comlink in this whole process is that it's cultural change. That's all an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur does. They bring a certain kind of mindset to everything they do. They ask, where is the opportunity, or what is the need? How can this be done better? And it just becomes a habit of mind. And when that happens, you get stuff happening. I've had conversations in corridors at Comlink from people that are not doing the course, but the word is out that, the company's interested in new ideas, and there's this sort of wacky guy that's sort of in charge of that. And they say, oh, we could do such and such, and that's golden because not everyone's going to be a fabulous idea, but the culture is such that we not only tolerate, but we will reward ideas like that. And that's a real differentiator. If we're looking at about a competitive advantage, you might remember the competitive advantage tool, then that sort of capacity in our workforce sets us apart and ultimately helps us become more successful. So that's just a couple of comments from what I've heard. I'm thinking this platform, Zoom, actually allows us to chat. If you roll over the menu bar right down at the bottom, you'll see a little sort of speech balloon with the word chat. If you click on that, you'll open up a pane in my machine anyway, it's on the right side. And Amanda just typed hello to everybody. I'm thinking rather than just sort of stop and leave pauses hanging in space every now and then, I'm pretty conscious of this because I just talk, as you know. If something occurs to you, a question or a comment occurs to you while it's going on, just type it in. And Amanda and or I or Emma or anybody else will address that in the rhythm of the thing rather than stopping and starting. So use it that way if you choose. And then once we throw up slides, I did this last week and I can't remember exactly what I did, but I managed to change my view of the screen. So the slide was on the left, but I also, on the pane on the right, I had 8 windows, so I could actually see everybody. So if you want to do that, I liked that I could see everybody. It defaulted to a window pane where I only had 3 windows open on people and I had to scroll through. But just fiddle with it might be the view. If you roll over the top, there's a speaker view versus other view, enter or exit full screen. There's various things you can do without dropping out of the conversation. But make use of that, that chat capacity to ask questions if they come up. Just type them in and I'll see them as we go. Okay, any questions or comments before we start?
Just one, Michael. Amanda, you mentioned you've had a storm. We've got a storm now. I can hear the thunder now. We've got lots of lightning and it's very likely I will lose power. We lose power a lot in the storms in the mountains where I live. So if that happens, I will try and get back on, but if not, I'll watch the record.
Okay.
Thanks, Tammy. I was in the same boat. I was actually looking at the storm thinking, because I'm up in the mountains outside Brisbane, I was thinking, oh, can I do it all remote by phone? And yeah, so.
Fingers crossed.
You bushies. Okay. So I'll share a screen and take it to the 2 tools that for Amanda to finish off, and then we'll jump into this week's webinar. So, oops, that's not the one I want to share because that's last week. That's this week, rather.
So while Michael's putting that up, just so we don't lose time, so the tools that, what I kind of ended with last week was around that whole love marks, branding, you know, where we get attached to something that we buy into the story because we see such value in it as a consumer that we buy into the story of it. And that what we need our consumers to do, and it doesn't matter if you're not selling a product, that Comlink is selling the product, but what you need is, and you've almost got 2 audiences. You've got the overarching audience, which is your intended participants, and then you've got you need to pitch your idea to Comlink. So you've kind of got 2 audiences and you need to be able to talk about your idea in both those ways. You know, firstly, people who are actually going to fund it or buy into it, and then also the people who are going to participate in it. Because, you know, time is also an exchange, particularly when you're an older person and your energy levels maybe not as big. Why would I join what you're offering over something else, or apathy, or not doing anything? So the tool that goes with what we were talking about that helps you frame that and helps you get what we're aiming for is for you to be a love mark. So we're aiming for you to give your customers high value and high respect, and you know, emotionally and intellectually, that they buy into what you're offering. So the tool that goes with that is that up the top of the tool, you can see it there. You can actually see that you put your product features. So Michael, if you can flip to the next one. So the product features, and again, we're talking about the Intrapreneur program itself, which is what Michael's product is. His product features are that it's cheap and more effective. And this all comes from those earlier tools where what is my point of differentiation? His product features are that it's tested, it's evidence-based, it's project and workplace-based, and that it's got high engagement. So they're the things that he's picked out as the qualities that he wants to sell when he's talking to people. And down the other side is, what are the values for your customer? So again, we always talk about that it's not about what we want, it's about how we can give our customers what they want. So Michael said that it's cost efficiency. There's an innovative workforce. These are the things that his customer are looking for, social impact, and new products and services. And again, very similar to that tool that we had in the beginning where you kind of matrixed your different products and your different client bases. This one you start to matrix. So you actually mark where is the crossover between cost efficiency. Well, yes, it is cheaper and more effective. My quality can give them cost efficiency. It can show that it's cost effective. I've got proven, tested evidence of that. Because it's workplace based, I can show it's cost effective. High engagement, that's not really, high engagement isn't a cost effective thing. So they're not going to look at that and think, oh, well, this is cost effective because it's high engagement. So you get the idea looking at that tool layout, where the crossovers are and where you kind of, again, what we're looking for is actions to come out of this. So you can kind of see where I put my energy, where is that first pin on those, 10-pin bowling pins. So I'm going to be really pitching this, that this is project and workplace based, because that ticks all the boxes that my customer is looking for. So that'll be your key marketing tool, or your key point. And the other ones come in, hey, it's engaging. Yes, it's been proven and tested, all of those things. But that main one is that, hey, this is project and workplace based. So that's the pitch that you'll be going with. And that starts to set you up with how you sell yourself.
Can I just add something to that? And this is real world, right? Like at the moment, there's no reason when it goes into the marketplace that Comlink should use these tools, that Comlink should use Edgeware. And in fact, there's a real risk that there'll be a conflict of interest because I'm on the payroll. So it's I'm going through the process now of costing what similar education training costs and what it delivers around the country. And the fact that what we're doing now is actually workplace based and based on real world projects is in fact turning up to be the real key differentiator. You guys are working on real things from the start, not whatever's written on page 37 and then follow the example. So this is actually the case. Thanks, Amanda.
No worries. So the marketing message Michael's pulled out of this is cost-efficient ways to develop new products and services built on real-world worker experience. That's what his marketing campaign and his branding is going to sell. His actions is he needs to create high-level and brief slide deck and presentation at CEO and board level, because they're the people who have actually got the money to invest and they're looking for cost savings, but they're also looking for innovation and a point of difference for their businesses. So he kind of knows who his ideal customer is and he knows what he has to pitch to them. Would you like to flip to the next tool?
Yep.
So out of that, because again, our little slogan that Edgeware always talks about is action precedes clarity. We're looking for some very real grounded actions. It's all very well. I spend a lot of my days now as a producer working on, campaigns, and a lot of, particularly for government, who have these great slogans, but they need to see real action about, it's great to have these great ideas, but if it doesn't actually form into an actual campaign or an actual action, you're actually losing it. It's not, all the great ideas just end up on the cutting room floor in a way. So you can see down there, we've given you a kind of framework to help you guide those actions and how that comes out. So the first one is the perspective. So you've got your branding and positioning.
Do you want me to go to the...
Yeah, if that's okay, just so that people have a real, framework for it. So, so again, this is for Michael's Edgeware. So you've got branding and positioning, find and repeat the motto. And Michael, I really like Michael's. I think it's quite clever. Make money, have fun, change the world. That comes out of his why statement that he did right at the very beginning. And it's just a really nice, easy to remember. It says everything that Edgeware does, and it also encompasses that point of difference. You don't expect to have fun while you're doing business training very often. Creative. So find a unique visual signal for the program. So again, that's where you bring in your creatives and you look for something that's quite striking. And remember, I do a lot of work with logo development and things like that. it needs to tell a story. Every logo needs to tell a story. So the narrative that you're telling is, this is cost efficient, real world business training that works on real projects. So whatever your logo does needs to tell that story in some way.
And
Relation.
just while that, sorry, Amanda, the
No, you're right.
creative in marketing speak is anything that generates the collateral and so on. It's not problem solving and what we think of as creativity with a small c. Marketers will say, where's the creative? And by that they mean, where's the visuals? Where's the collateral? Where's the stuff? The text, the visuals that we use. It's called the creative, in the same way as actors in the movie world are called the talent. Yeah, that's all creative means in this sense.
Yeah, good point, Michael. Relationships and networks. Okay, so build a segment-specific database for marketing. And, you know, it's so easy these days to just kind of grab people's emails and never do anything with it. Already you're well positioned because you're actually in the industry, you're working in the actual organization. You've actually already got a head start, and I'm sure some of those lists are already out there. Start finding, where are your people, where are your databases, what can you exchange to get hold of some of those databases, and start gathering the right people. Partnerships like Paul's been doing is really helpful for that.
Who are your sneezers? Who are the people that you need to infect with your virus?
Yeah, and a really good sneezer. I'm working on an age tech startup. I'm helping them at the moment. We've found one particular sneezer. She's amazing because she goes to all the conferences overseas and in Australia. She's often asked to speak at these things, and she likes our idea, and she often uses our idea as an example. And so we're getting people, we're a startup. We're not even at that, like the starting point really. And people are already inquiring just from this one person mentioning it in all of her talks. Find that person for you. We identify, I think people were saying, is it Tammy? Poor Tammy, have you been feeling like you've had people knocking on your door saying, oh, not yet, maybe. Okay, so pricing and financial, put a case for internal funding and percentage for the marketing team resources. So you do need, this is a cost. Even if you do it, a lot of people in business, they go a bit wrong and they just say, oh, I'll just do something on Facebook. It's still got to be done well, because bad marketing can be as damaging as good marketing can be as positive. So you do need to maybe think about that in your financial budgets when we go back to financials.
This is an important one with Comlink, with Intrapreneurs as well, because we have marketing people, we have finance people, but if we just drop more work on them from a great height, Jay will tell you, I think, that they're not going to be very happy with that. We have to justify them spending time on our little projects in the company. And if we're asking them for X hours for this, they've got to have that time. That has to be allocated in their workload.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Michael. I used to work a lot with QT, and the marketing teams there, if you didn't prove your value to them, you just went to the bottom of the pile, or you get some very dodgy thing that they whipped up really quickly and they haven't invested. So once you get, and this is all, hopefully the tools are helping you, sell your story so that people become really invested and they're happy to put extra time in, and particularly your creatives and things like that, you know, they'll give it a lot of thought. So yeah, you do need to think about the financials of that, and it is a real cost in anything that you do. And think about, I mean, a classic one that I do with a lot of my clients is they think, oh yeah, I'll just do a Facebook campaign. When you're working with older people, are they going to get on Facebook and find out about your project? They're probably going to find out about it from their care workers, from the respite centre notice board, from, you know, the maybe having some flyers out around the place. So think about that, because if you've got print costs, well, there's another thing to consider. Feedback. Develop a detailed feedback and suggestions questionnaire. So for yourself, how are you going to actually hear whether your message has got out? And I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure about Comlink, Michael, you can follow me up on this, but most people who are investing in something, they really want to see proof of return. They will want some metrics. They'll want to know, if I invest this time, or if I do a social media campaign, how do I know it's worked? So you maybe think in those terms as well. You know, how, you know, is it and again, think about your client base. Is it better to grab someone after an experience and just, you know, stick your phone and record a couple of words from them, as opposed to sending them a survey monkey? you know, that kind of thing. So what's going to give people the opportunity to actually give you quality feedback in a way that speaks to your clients?
One thing I'd recommend for everybody on this is, it's the case that Comlink's investing in quite a sophisticated but hopefully simple to use social impact system. So we'll be able to actually measure the impact, the social impact of what we're doing, because it's tricky, right? Because it's not tangible. It's not like how many donuts you're selling. It's intangible. It's how people are feeling, whether you're making the world a better place. So we're actually spending quite a lot of time creating these metrics. So I think it's in everybody's business case to find out about that as it rolls out over the next year, so that we can actually use that. What is actually the value? Let's say the bucket list example, you know, of giving somebody about to, not quite, but about to go into palliative care, a trip to the beach where they met their husband or wife. You know, what's that actually worth in terms of making a better world? Because we're going to spend $10 on it. How can we justify that $10 in the end?
Absolutely. And, you know, again, think cleverly for your marketing campaigns. I know this is a bit further down the road, but it's worth thinking about now. Things like, for example, recording testimonials at the time where people are still emotional and they've enjoyed the experience. Record that testimonial there and then you've got marketing collateral. There's your thing that you put up on your Comlink kind of Facebook page. You know, making sure you capture that data in a variety of checkpoints, you know, as opposed to, again, it's one of the areas I think a lot of, and I'm guilty of this myself, you just let it go. You're so focused on the actual project, you don't think about those things. But testimonials in the moment, just a quick interview with Mary who's been down to the beach, how was that for you? And then what you can do is put it through a data system where it picks up the keywords that you're looking for and puts it into a matrix. There's so many tools now that then give you, for your other customer, which is Comlink, here we go, of our participants, 72% use the word incredible or life-changing, that kind of thing. So, and you can do a bit of research around this stuff. And finally, social and environmental, identify any environmental charities to support. So this is a big one for Michael. He really wants to give back from the program. Those things, unfortunately, it's a bit callous, but they look great on your marketing campaigns as well. If you invest in this, 10% of the profits go here. You know, you're giving a double give, and we know that people feel better when they do give. All right, so from that, once you've got your kind of broad umbrella down the side, you actually pull out real tangible actions. So again, everything we're trying to do in this course is make it so that you're actually doing something real and you could start tomorrow. So the first thing that Michael, and you'll see on the final thing too, it's got short, medium and long. This is the time frames. So what we're thinking is short is like in the next couple of weeks to month. Medium is in the next couple of months, like 2 to 3 months, and long is in the next six months to a year. So you start to identify those things. So you might not race out right now and get a graphic artist to do all your logos before you've thought up the ideas, but you could be looking for the databases. So Michael has identified build a database as one of his goals, negotiate in-house marketing support, design feedback database, so design the questionnaire, and find a charity to support. So those things, you know, he's got his list, he's got stuff he can go on to. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
That's good.
It's good? Excellent.
I just
All right.
remembered I just saw that my chat window disappeared when I shared the screen. So that idea I talked about a minute ago might not work. But thanks, Amanda. Notice
worries.
that, and from now on, we're going to hear this word action more and more often. You know, we can have the best ideas in the world, but unless we can turn them into something on the ground, that's all they are. They're just ideas. Ideas are cheap. So any successful business person will tell you that it's all about action. It's all about execution. A-grade idea, A-grade execution. Amanda?
Yeah. The other thing I want to say with that too, there's no need to be overwhelmed or worried about that too, because those actions, you can break them down to really small, achievable things. So if you're a super busy person, which pretty much everybody in this course is, just a little thing that you can do each day. You're walking past the marketing team at work, I'll pop in and ask them, do you have capacity for this? How would you do that? Like just those little things that you can do to kind of like lots of little actions amount to a big action. I think, you know, like I shared last week with that to-doist list, doing the little things, you turn around and suddenly you've done a big chunk of something. So
Thank you.
cool.
Yep. Tiny,
Next tool.
achievable, tickable targets. That's all about.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back to the main screen. Nobody's typed anything, at least that I can see. So we'll jump into number 4. I think this is it. Yes. And this is my favorite one, the one I was signaling last week that I love so much, which is the finances. And I'm conscious of the fact that Jay's going to think that I'm talking at kindergarten level, which I sort of am because that's the level I'm at. But I think it's sort of, I have a simple example that I think will help us understand this. It certainly helps me understand it. And the key to this is understanding cash flow. Whether you're a small business or an entrepreneurial project within a larger business like Comlink, what is critical is not the budget that you run, but the cash flow that you run over 12 months. Let's say I can write myself a budget as Edgeware, as a training company, and say in a year I'm going to generate revenue of $10 and I'm going to have $8 coming in. I'm laughing. I'm in profit, right? The fact is, though, that in my business, in training, for 2 months of the year, through the Great Australian Summer, which happens to overlap with Christmas, nobody's interested in doing training. So if I don't have enough money in the bank by the time that income cuts out for 2 months, I can go broke. Okay? So $99 in the bank and $100 worth of bills, I'm broke. $100 in the bank and $99 worth of bills, I'm in business. And this, essentially, the financial component of this course is about managing cash flow. It's not the broader matter of budgeting, but managing money in, money out. How much money is in the bank or the account relative to what the costs are. So that's a cash flow analysis. That's all we're learning here. We're not learning budgeting, the finer points of finances with business. That can come afterwards. Basically, you've got to know about cash flow. The reason, if we were in small business, that most small businesses go broke is failure to manage money. And the reason, the highest proportion of businesses that fail to manage money fail to manage cash flow. Money in, money out. So I've just uploaded in Dropbox a couple of extra files. So if you don't have the Dropbox URL to get into this folder already, I think I've shared that with everybody, but if you haven't, just drop me a line and I'll make sure that you can, so you get in there so you can download this. Somebody said they were having trouble with Dropbox. Was it you, Chris? I'm not, yeah.
With me.
Yeah.
I'm all good now. No, Michael, I was, but I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm still having problems with it.
Okay. Do you have Dropbox installed as an app on your machine? Like, does it sit in the Windows Explorer?
I think that's the problem because Dean's got to do it.
Okay, make it Dean's problem. Tell him that you need this for your intrapreneurship program.
So I think that's why. I think that's where I got to. I needed his password or something.
Oh, because it's the office system. Okay. We'll have words with Dean. Like Jay and Dean and I sit about six meters from each other, so we'll work that out. Anyway, assuming you can get into that folder, there's now the highlighted files in there. Smart Pure Clear is just a checklist thing. I won't even talk about that this session. We might go into it later. Risk analysis and management is not part of the Cert 3 course as such. You don't have to upload that. It's in the new format though. You can fill it in. I highly recommend doing a risk analysis on your project, and I'll talk more about that when we get there. The pricing tool is useful for some businesses, not so useful for others. So for Steph's business, for example, if she's asking people to contribute something for a makeover or for a haircut, for a styling session, then that will be relevant to her. But say Tammy's, well, whatever Tammy's, at the first version of Tammy's business, where there's no money coming in, pricing is not an issue. You know, I mean, you take this tool like any other tool only as far as it's useful to you. You don't need to fill them in just to be filling them in. And this Cert3 cash flow, your name, is an Excel document. So for a start, you're using an app called Microsoft Excel or the Apple version of that. And I'll show an example of what I mean. That is the uploadable file. That is the thing that you need to actually fill in. So this tool is, again, part of the once was delivery of this Cert3. We don't use it anymore, but I'm using it as an example, and you'll have access to these files as always. And if it is relevant to you, you may choose to use it. I'm using it now because it helps me simplify and explain how this cash flow analysis and estimate process works. So by now, you might remember the first tool that we looked at was a product market segmentation tool. You listed your customers in the row across the top, and you listed your products in the column down the left, and then you cross-referenced them. This is really just doing the same thing, but it breaks services, the products in that language, into services and products. Like products are things like donuts that you can buy. Services are, say, hairdressing services that are typically charged out by the hour. They're qualitatively different, but they may or may not make sense to you. They do in the example that I will give you. So in the example that I'll give you, we're trying to actually, the example that I want to work on is the simplest one possible that we worked out with our finance guru who usually teaches this stuff. Imagine that you're a young woman, you have a bit of a flair for making ceramic and glass and beads, jewelry, and little accessories like that. You think there might be a business in it. It's fairly low risk and low cost, so you think you might start making those earrings you've been making for your friends and taking them to the market and seeing if people will buy them. What are you going to charge? Whether is that a business, and etc. And who is going to buy these things? What are the values that they see in them? So your name's Susie, and you're making these jewelries. This is not my slide. This is Susanna's slide. I would never put a picture like this on a slide. But there you go. I didn't want to do the whole thing again. So services, products down the left, customers on the right. So she's identified her customers because she's done the first tool as teenagers, women 30 to 60, and children. She has a service. She thinks she has a service. So consultations on style, how to wear things, how to do your hair, etc. And then products, earrings, necklaces, and rings. It's necklace, not necklace. Susanna is speaking English as her second language, so she's often, like my partner, coming up with interesting interpretations of English. But she's actually gone through those customers and those products and asked herself, how many of those things can I sell in a month? So she reckons she can sell 4 style consultations, which she's charging out at $100 an hour, to women between 30 and 60. So she's actually going to make $400. If you look at the total column on the right, she's going to make $400 from that per month. So that might be 4 $100 consults. So apart from that, she's making earrings, necklaces, and rings at those price points in the column on the left. And she reckons she can sell those to those particular customers. So she reckons she can sell 10 pairs to teenagers per month off her market stall, making her $100 gross for those earrings, for that line. Similarly with necklaces and rings to those customers. Women 30 to 60, she reckons she can sell that value every month. And kids, she reckons she can sell earrings to little kids as well. So she ends up with a total for each product or service per month, which she fills in over on the right-hand side, adds them all up, and that's her gross revenue for the month. That's what's coming into her business per month. Anyone unclear so far? I'll ask this question from time to time because if you're like me, you can get lost. Steel trap mind like Jay's, not a problem, but with my mushy sort of head, much more so. Okay, that's the first thing she's going to do. She's going to estimate essentially her income for her business per month. Now, if your income is dependent on philanthropists, again, I'm thinking of Tammy. She's not necessarily selling anything here, although if she integrates her idea with Mel's and there's actually an income stream, then pricing does become part of her estimation of the value of her project. But if she's not and she's relying on philanthropists and grants, those are still customers. So how much per month on average do you reckon you can get from a philanthropist, from a government agency, or whatever? It's still income to provide for your product. So in one way or another, it still is money in, money out. That's income. What's expenditure? So,
sorry, Michael.
Go ahead.
One of the mistakes that I often see people make at this stage is overestimating how many services or products they can actually do. So I've had people before where we've done it monthly and I've looked through and I'm like, how many days is this or how many hours is that? And there's not that many days in a month for them to offer those services. So just think about be really realistic about what's possible.
That's a good point, Emma. Thank you. It's probably good to be conservative and surprise yourself rather than be over ambitious and disappoint yourself.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
For this part, is it only the estimate for the start of your company or for when it's further on?
Just for the start, and that's an excellent question, in fact, because you will have some startup costs that you won't have later on. And you have to pay attention to that because that's still money out at the beginning. And again, costs will vary during the year, and that's part of the point of the cash flow estimate. So
Thank you.
these are the costs on average, just as a guesstimate. Susie hasn't done this before, so she's pulling numbers out of the air, but just make a list. What are the expenses that you think you'll run up in order to actually get that jewelry or that consultation to your customer? And she's identified materials, fuel. She's driving around to markets, the tools she needs to make these. Some she'll have, some she'll need to buy. The cost of samples. She has this idea of making free giveaways to give to people, to attract them, to give to sneezers. She's going to have run a bank account. She's going to have to run a website, and she needs some office supplies. That's what she's already decided, and she's broken that down to a guesstimate. She hasn't done it yet, so she's only guesstimating per month. This is what she reckons per month, although the tools are probably an upfront cost, as will come too. So she's done income and she's done expenditure in a really broad brush sort of way, and she's done that on a monthly basis. Now, I reckon you can use this tool to do something like this if it's useful, if it's relevant to your particular idea. If it isn't, just jump into what we're going to next. So this is the demo I'm going to give you. I've got to share another file for this. So please be patient with me. That's the one. This is the one. Okay. So this is the Excel file that you will download and use. And I've just filled in July. And I filled in exactly the same numbers that I was just showing you. I can't flash backwards and forwards, but you might remember that she had some money. If you look under sales over on the left-hand side, can you see my cursor, by the way, when I roll it over sales like that? Good. So that's going to be useful here. You'll remember she had consultation earrings, necklaces, and rings as items that she can sell. So that's income. We begin to fill in this column, which is for the month of July. She's running a financial year profit and loss statement, not profit and loss, cash flow statement here. She's starting with an opening bank balance of 0. Now, you might already have some money in the bank for your project. You know, Comlink might have said, we're going to give you a certain amount of money to start up your project. You might have a little grant from somewhere. I know Charmaine in the previous iteration had a small grant from the council to do what she wanted to do. So that's money in the bank that you're actually starting with. That's the first yellow box. And again, money in, money out is what it's all about. She's starting, in this case, she's starting with 0. And in the month of July, she's estimating that when she adds up all those things, she's going to bring in $1,275. So she's got $1,275 in cash. It's a market stall, right? In a pocket. And wacko, she goes out and spends $1,200 on a big party for her friends. No, she doesn't, because she has costs. And there's 2 kinds of costs I want to talk about here. One is cost of sales and one is expenses. So cost of sales goes up here, expenses comes down the bottom. I'll tell you why in a sec. Cost of sales are those costs which you run up depending on how many sales you make. So if she makes heaps of sales, her costs for materials are going to vary. If she makes hardly any sales, she's not going to have to pay much for materials the next time around. Cost of sales is a number, is a cost for you that varies with how much business you're doing. So if you're bringing heaps and heaps of people to your market garden using transport services, then the more people you bring, the more it's going to cost you. The less people you bring, the less it's going to cost you. So materials and fuel are COS, costs for her particular business. So in a given month, if she sells $1,275 worth of, and she has that in her pocket, she actually doesn't have it in her pocket because she's had to shell out for materials and for fuel, which come to 370. So the total cash inflow is 1275. Total cash payments is 370. It means that the gross cash movement, that first grey band, is $905. That's actually after costs for sales, what she's got in her pocket. By the way, the Excel sheet that you have will be programmed. So once you feed in the individual costs and sales that you're getting, it'll do all the adding up for you, both on a monthly level on the column, and then if you look along the row, it'll actually do your cost for the year as well, the income and costs for the year. Now, the other kind of costs, these are called in tech speak, in accountant speak, variable costs. They're variable because they vary with the amount of business that you do. You also have something called fixed costs. These are the costs of doing business, whether you do sales or not. These are just, if you hire a shop, you're going to have to pay that rent, whether you sell anything out of that shop or not, whether you open the doors or not. That's a fixed cost. So monthly, that will be a certain amount in something called rent. So you remember in that list that she did originally, she's got various kinds of costs. She's now breaking them up into fixed costs and variable costs. These costs now, which we're calling expenses in this language, are the things she's going to have to pay every month, whether she's making money or not. And that's tools, which is an upfront cost. Like, she's not going to have to buy tools every month, but to start the business, she's going to have to do that. Samples, as I mentioned before, bank fees, web hosting, internet and office supplies. When she adds all those up, she's actually spending, apart from the $370 for materials and fuel, she's spending another $650 that month on costs for her business. So net cash movement, that's not a column, that's not a row for numbers, it's just a header. Her closing bank balance, given that she started at 0, her closing bank balance is $255. Now, if she was paying tax, she'd have to consider that. Tax is a whole other story that I don't particularly want to get into here, and it's not particularly relevant for an Intrapreneurs project, but it means if she thought right at the beginning, remember she's got $1,275 in her pocket, if she's gone out and spent more than $255 of that, she's in trouble. Because in the end, after she's paid all these costs, and these numbers can come in at different times during the year, these bills can come in at different times, she's actually only got $255 that month in free cash. Now, is that any unclear for anyone? Really important that I'm as clear as I can be, given that I struggle with this stuff, right?
Michael, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Yeah. Wages for my business.
Wages, you mean a proportion of somebody's wage to engage with this project?
For staffing.
So you want to hire somebody?
Yes.
That's a fixed cost.
Fixed cost, yeah.
So
okay.
That's a monthly cost you're going to have to pay whether you're doing business or not.
Mm-hmm.
The two big fixed costs that typically run small businesses into the ground are wages and rent, and utilities related to rent, turning the lights on, because you're going to have to pay those anyway, whether it's a high period or low period in the year. So I've just filled this in for 1 month. Now, this is going to be a relatively simple exercise for most of you, as far as I understand what your ideas are. But if it gets fussy, then come and either talk to me or email me or go and see Jay, because she's going to know a lot more than this about this stuff than I do. So if that's okay, I'll stop sharing that and go back to my webinar slide. No, wrong webinar slide.
I was just going to say, Michael.
Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, giving yourself, like at the start, you'll give yourself estimates, but if you get an activity up and going, to move and then find out what those costs really are is important as well. So they're another flashy word, but they're called your actual costs. But to then feed them in and see how close your estimates were is really important.
And sometimes you don't know until you're actually out there, until you suck it and see, you know. And that comes to the matter of risk and risk analysis, which we'll also talk about here. Is it a reasonable risk for me when I'm arguing to Comlink, as I am at the moment, that it should invest marketing, time, and money into selling the Intrapreneurs project as a Comlink product? What kind of risk am I asking them to take on that investment, 50 grand or whatever it turns out to be? Okay, so you'll notice we're not just talking about July here. That's all that I was just talking about, that filled in. The algorithm, the program on Excel will actually tell you what the whole cash movement has been about in relation to your closing bank balance. That's actually what's important. That's what sends you broke or puts you into profit. Now, this is the way we framed it different last time. The language is slightly different, but the principle is exactly the same. You've got sales up at the top coming in. You've got a cost of sales that's related to what it costs you to produce or generate those sales, which gives you so-called gross margin. And again, if you Google gross margin, it will give you a neat formula for gross margin. Is essentially what you're making as profit before you take into account expenses, tax, and other on-costs, fixed costs. And gross margin is what a lot of people like Riaz at Comlink will pay attention to, because there's all sorts of ways they can be creative with fixed costs after that. But in terms of the unit of production that you're concerned with, your particular little project, he's looking at a bandwidth of gross margin that experience and the industry is telling him are good or less good. And at the moment, I'm negotiating a gross margin with Riaz for the sale of this once we get Intrapreneurs going of about 45%, and Rio's gets as expressive as he ever does about things when he hears that, because that's good news, right? In the end, profit after tax, taxation, we don't have to worry about that as entrepreneurs. If we were small business people, we probably would. Now, this is where I'm getting to. That using that same language and those same numbers expressed over a whole year, a whole 12 months of trading, this is a cash flow projection for Susie's jewelry business. So we'll see up in the left-hand column, we have income from sales, we have cost of sales, and then we have expenses. Now, for the sake of demonstration, we're assuming that she's doing uniform sales through the whole year. So total, she's making 1,275 gross per month across the whole year. In fact, if she was doing this sort of business, she'd have to factor in things like holidays, like people will be spending more money probably in holiday periods and rather less in other periods of the year. So that number will fluctuate, and the Excel file that you'll be working on will allow you to make for different entries and different totals if it's relevant to you. In my business, in Edgeware's business, as a training business, as I say, 2 months of the year are just deserts for me. I really have to pay attention to the fact that there's a low period for my business. Remember we talked about tools and samples before? We actually put in 200 bucks for tools and 300 bucks for samples. That's the sort of one-off cost that she actually puts into July. That doesn't occur in any other place. And managing cash flow means understanding that not all of these costs are necessarily monthly costs. A lot of these fixed costs, not rent, not wages, you've got to pay those monthly anyway, but some things like, web hosting, insurances, those sorts of things you can pay quarterly, you can pay half yearly, you can pay annually, depending on what suits you. So that will affect your cash flow from month to month. Ultimately, this enables Stephanie to estimate that she's going to, having started the year with a bank balance of 1,000, she's going to finish it with 28,760 bucks. Now she's just guesstimating before she started with this, that's what she'll end up with. In fact, she'll be tweaking this constantly as she goes, as she finds out that, as Emma suggests, she's overestimated how much she can sell, or she's overestimated how much things are going to cost. She can tweak that as she goes on. So if you look at her price for web hosting, she's going to pay that, she's suggesting she's going to pay that in July at the moment. So it becomes part of her July costs. Look at her total expenses for July, 650 bucks, whereas they're only 70 bucks a month thereafter. This is a really hyper simplified cash flow analysis, right? This is really for demonstration. I don't think she could run a business like this, but there it is. The point about cash flow analysis is that you can create a snapshot that shows over a year where the highs and lows are going to be, the highs of income and the highs of costs are going to be. And you can still, at the end of the day, say to Riaz or somebody in the organization, look, I reckon this is going to bring in 28 grand, or I reckon this is going to cost us 28 grand, but because I've done my homework on social impact, while it costs us 28 grand, it's going to create this amazing effect out there in the world that if government did it would cost 128 grand. So we're going to do it for 28 grand and get the credit and the branding value for Comlink. What do you reckon? It creates evidence that you can use in a conversation like that. So you're not just saying, oh, we're going to do it because it feels good. You're saying, we're going to do it because it feels good, it makes a difference, and I paid attention to what it's actually going to cost. Money in, money out. Anybody want to ask a question about this? So you'll have all of these slides, as I say. I don't know how long it's taken me to get things as simple as this. Like, I really am challenged with numbers, as I suspect a few of you are as well. But it's really as simple as $100 in the bank versus $99 worth of bills, or $100 worth of bills versus $99 in the bank. When it comes to the money, that's all cash flow is. Money in, money out. Have you got enough money in the bank at the end of the month, or in the account at Comlink at the end of the month, to justify what you're spending? And if you're going into negative territory, how will you argue to Comlink that that is still worthwhile for us to do? Because we're not just a money-making mill. We're actually about making the world a better place as well.
Michael,
Yeah.
will we be starting at 0, or should we ask if there is an amount that they give us to start off with? Or
Depends. I'm sorry, I can't say yes or no. It may well be in your case, Steph, that there's an allocation in the budget already for social kind of services, connectivity services. I mean, I can imagine Tammy would probably know more about this than me, that we have an allocation already budgeted for morning teas, for tours, for these sorts of things. It may well be that there's a budget line that your project can come from. That would probably be the most convenient way for things to happen. So let's say we get to the end of this, you make your pitch, and Riaz and Rosie between them say, look, we like the idea, we can invest $10 in it for you to try it over the next 6 months. You reckon you can get $6 of that back from people paying for, subsidized or discounted hairdos or whatever. Let's review that again in 3 months. That's probably the scenario that would play out in your case. Tammy, am I talking too much?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Steph, if you're wanting transport to be included with this, or whether it's a mobile beautician going to a client's home.
so a mobile service. I did message Paul today, the fleet manager, about how much it would be to rent out another car or
Yeah.
to buy one outright, but he hasn't replied yet, so I'm just waiting for him to reply with that.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, if you're getting clients to, if you would, as an example, to set up a little hair salon or beautician salon in the office and got clients to come in for that, you could use transport. You could also use the social support funding for that. So your costs would be much lower. You'd just be paying for the hairdresser or the beautician.
Yeah.
But to do it mobile, your costs are going to be higher because we wouldn't be able to claim any funding for that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Which means then that user pays becomes more important in that scenario, Steph, and you've got to ask your question, will there be price resistance from our elderly clients paying even $10 for a makeover that would cost them $100 in a salon,
Yeah.
because $10 is still $10 when you're on a pension. A point to make, though, is that within Comlink, I've noticed with the rollout of the first cycle of Intrapreneurs, that you don't have to this doesn't have to be the last word. What we're in the business now, in this sense, our customer for this is the C-suite and the board of Comlink. And if they think that you've got a credible idea and you've thought it through, it's not the end of the story at that pitch. We would consider, following on with the talk. Like right now, Michaela's idea of the community garden, everybody thought it'd be sort of rows of sort of little garden beds. You've seen the things. But as the Vitality Village planning goes out, we're actually talking about putting food trees all around it. And it's sort of a different sort of physical layout, and her business case has to change as the possibilities of that change. So don't feel like you need to get married to these numbers. Just show us that you understand the numbers and you've given it the financial element of this some thought. This is, again, a loose tool. You don't need to fill this in or upload it as part of your Cert 3, but a lot of people find it useful. when it comes to the matter of, say, you know, if there's a user pays element to your business idea, what is that price? Now that can be a price for a donut, or it can be a price for an hour. The example here is an hourly price. The example is for a consulting business where their unit price is an hour, $1 per hour, but it can just as easily be $1 per donut, where the unit price is a donut sold. You might have several products, and you can use this same pricing tool for each of those products. Now, it may or may not be useful to some people, so I don't want to put heaps of time on it, into it, but if you do find it useful and you're not quite sure, or you want to check something, follow through with me and ask me what I mean. So the page is divided in half, okay? Above that middle line, we have the equation, and it is equation. So you've got something on one side of the equal sign equals something on the other side, and that other side is the unit price. In this case, it's an hourly rate because it's a consultancy business. It could be price per donut, price per jumper, price per makeover or hairdressing session, what have you. So on the top of the line, looking at the left of the equal sign, if this was a store business like Steph's, not Steph's business, Susie, the jeweler, okay, you ask her, what does she want to take home every year from the business? What does she want to put in a pocket and spend on a holiday, or spend on going somewhere doing something? What is that amount? What would she ideally like to take home? And let's say in the example underneath that middle line, I've got an example of somebody working this out. So this is a consultant who says, I want to take 100 grand home. You know, that's what I have in my pocket at the end of the year. Terrific. So back up to the top line, desired annual earnings will actually cost a certain amount, and tax and on costs, super, various costs related to actually earning that amount of money. And the thumbnail that I'll use for a business like that is about 30%. So if you look at the example down in the bottom left-hand corner as we're going, this person wants to take home 100 grand net. They're going to have to spend about 30 grand on tax, super, costs related to that amount of money. On top of that, you add the annual costs. These are the expenses, both fixed and variable costs. What it costs you to produce and deliver your thing, and what it costs you to carry on business generally. This person is guesstimating, and this is quite common with a service-based business like consulting. It doesn't cost very much at all because your product is actually between your ears. You're not having to bake brownies and take them out and sell them. So this person is calculating 20 grand. So if you look at that 100 grand, 30 grand, 20 grand, you've got $150,000 worth of revenue that needs to come into that business for that person to take home that 100 grand. Okay, really important to allow for things like taxation or costs, bills that'll come in 6 months after you've actually consumed the thing, because those things, when they come in, are fairly unforgiving and they can bite you on the bum. So above that line, we've got, say, 150 grand. Now, underneath that line, we're going to divide what it costs, basically, or how many of those units you can produce over a year. And here, remember, desired annual earnings. We're now talking about 12 months in this tool. So underneath that, we first of all ask ourselves, how many weeks do we actually want to work? Yeah. Now, if you're selling donuts, it's how many weeks of the year can you sell donuts? If it was me costing what I charge you to do a training course, it's how many weeks in the year can I actually earn money delivering that training? So in this case, the consultant is saying there's 52 weeks in the year. I want 6 weeks off. So there's only 46 weeks in a year where I can actually earn money, where I can actually earn some dough towards that 150 grand that I want. Apart from that, there's a number of hours per week that I can actually sell my time. Like I might work 50 hours in a week, but a lot of that 50 hours, in this case, half of that, whoa, is not paid. It's not billable. So what I end up with is an estimate that in 46 weeks, I can sell 25 hours of my labor. Now, if I was doing this for donuts, it'd be in each week of the 46 weeks that are available to me in a year, I can sell 25 donuts. You know, it works. Their unit price is an hour. Your unit price might be donut or makeover time, whatever it is, the essential product or service that you're selling. In this case, then, there's 1,150 billable hours in a year this person reckons they can actually sell. That's cash money in the till. That's not just an invention, that's cash. So if we take the 150 grand on the top of the line and divide it by the number of units that I need to sell to make that 150 grand, I end up with a unit price of $130.43. So this person ends up with a price for his or her key unit, donut or hour of expertise or whatever, of 130 bucks. And he or she has to ask, can I sell that? Am I confident that I can flog $130, my labor or my donuts or my bicycles or my makeovers at this price, 25 weeks, 46 weeks of the year, 25 times a week, you know? And if I can, sweet. If I can't, I got to go back because it's an equation and I got to sort of trim back the amount of money that I reckon I'm going to earn, or I've got to make some other savings, trim back the costs of producing those things, work more hours in a week, work more weeks in a year, tweak it backwards and forwards until I end up with a price that I'm happy with. Now, and that experience over time tells me I can actually make. If this is useful to you, good. If it's not, forget it. It works best if you're actually out there selling things. It works least if what we're doing is essentially giving things away and our value proposition has to do with social good and social impact and value to the company. Ultimately, though, if you care to, even if we're giving things away, if in the process we make Comlink look good to its customers, like government, it does actually have a financial value to the business. And we can get all fancy pants about that or not. You're not required to in terms of the Cert 3. All I'm really kibitzing for here is that you pay attention to the numbers and you show people that this is not a hobby. This is a business. Even though it's a not-for-profit, it's a business. And money has to come in and money has to go out. Any questions?
I was just going to say, Michael, that it is it looks really complicated, but this is exactly how my business works and how I work out how much I need to do every week to make it. And it does look complicated, but this is far more useful to me than a budget could be. With a budget, it's a novel. I don't know what client I'm going to have in May next year, but this tells me once I've really tack down on those annual costs, how much I need to have and how I can manage my cash flow. So it's a great tool.
Yeah. Once you've got the thing into this kind of shape, and your eventual submission for your Cert 3 might look like this, it might look something, it'll probably look simpler for most people, but in a glance, you can actually get a sense of the rhythm of the year that you're proposing. Exactly as Emma says, like if she gets to a point in May next year, probably by May next year, when she realizes that September she's going to have a great big dry patch, then she knows that about May, June, she's going to have to go out there and market her tits off to actually get that dough happening in September. That's the real usefulness from a business point of view of this. Thanks again, Emma. Time management. And this is where I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of thinking for a start.
Also, Michael, I just
Yes.
want to acknowledge that you did that really well. Just so you know that I know how difficult sometimes that is for you, but I think you made it really clear. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, sorry.
Yes.
Do we have to use that exact diagram for the pricing? Because I've kind of already done one, but mine's a bit different.
No. This is just thrown in, like the risk management thing that I'll throw in at the end for you to use or not, Steph.
Okay.
If you want to use it and upload it in the Cert3 site, ultimately I'll package all of your uploads and I'll give those as a little handout to the people you pitch to as background reading, which hopefully they look at before you do your 5-minute pitch. If it's useful for you for that purpose, go for it. If it's not, like every other tool here, just drop it. I'm not going to give you 0 out of 10 because you didn't fill in that tool. You know, all you have to do is logically argue that tool's not relevant to me, and it's fine. You get through. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Amanda. As Amanda intuits, I'm terrible with this sort of stuff. I'm married to somebody who's much better at it. She doesn't like it, but she's much better at it than me. Time management. Okay, here's a question for you. If you've got a pen and paper handy, you get some terrible news tomorrow. You're told that you're going to die in a year. You're going to die in 12 months. What are you going to do? What do you do? Just write down a couple of ideas. Just 30 seconds more. So can I ask for just a couple of ideas? Jay, what are you going to do?
So I would probably stop working.
Mm-hmm.
I would get my affairs in order and work out what I can sell to raise money, or to have cash money so I could travel and do the things that I want to do the bucket list things.
Thank you. Chris, what would you do?
Yeah, I obviously would stop work. Also, spend time with my kids and my family. And I've also got take care of my affairs and sort everything out there, and enjoy myself. Holiday, have fun.
Cool. Last one, Paul, what would you do? No, you need to turn on your mic, Paul. You're muted.
Sorry, similar to others, stop the commitments that I have on a regular basis. Prioritise family, really. Prioritise family, spending time with them. Probably my financial side of things is pretty well in order. My wife manages a lot of mine, so that's all good. So, just spending time with family.
Yeah. So you'll be unsurprised to hear that that's very, very common. Hardly anybody says, I'd start saving for that big 4-wheel drive that I've always wanted or whatever. You know, you actually start, your world shrinks in and you start paying attention to what actually counts. Now, this is important in small business because typically people who go into small business do it for more than just the money. They do it for meaning as well. The facts tell us that people who go into business for themselves make less over a lifetime than people who work for somebody else. So why on earth would you go into small business? And the answer is usually something like to make choices, to have freedom of choice, to do what I want to do, to follow my heart, to do, a lot of personal sort of stuff. Now, I want to suggest to you, whether you're in small business or you're working for somebody like Comlink, then this stuff needs to be front of mind, If we manage to luck into a job that means something to us, it's no longer a job, it's a career. And what makes it a career, not a job, is all this personal stuff. So when we're talking about time management, it's not just about getting work stuff done. It's doing our life better. And we will actually manage our work stuff better if we've got our life stuff in the mix. Work is not something that's separate from life. It's part of our life. We spend a large chunk of our life at work. Now, what does that mean if it's more than the money? If it's just the money, this is not a conversation for you and you can take the next half hour off, But if it is more than just the money for you, then pay attention, because we start with those big ticket items, okay? Personal driving goals and values. So I'm not going to start, as many time management processes do, with the list of stuff you've got to do at work. I'm going to start with the big ticket items. So we just did the top left-hand box. This is actually the tool. This is part of what you'll fill in and upload. And I don't expect the last word now, but it's part of the thinking and part of the Edgeware approach to this. If I had less than 1 year to live, I would do such and such. Now, on the basis of that, on the basis of what I'm going to call big rocks, I define my personal driving values. So let me explain big rocks to you for a second. If you imagine, can you actually see me? I'm not seeing, yeah? Yes. When I do this, can you see?
Yes.
Imagine that I've got a board here and I've got an old-fashioned 10-litre tin bucket, okay? Beside that bucket, I've got a pile of rocks the size of cricket balls. Beside that pile of rocks the size of cricket balls, I've got a pile of gravel, really small sort of river smooth stone. Beside that pile of gravel, I've got a pile of sand. And beside of that, I've got a jug of water. Has everybody got that in their head? So tin bucket, big rocks, little rocks, sand, water. Okay. So I take the rocks and I start putting them into the tin bucket until the top rock is level with the top of the bucket. Question 1, Paul, is that bucket full?
No.
Because?
There are gaps in and around the rocks.
Correct answer. Now I'm going to take, and I'm going to ask you this one, Chris. This is your question. I'm going to take those bits of gravel and I'm going to put it on top of the rocks and shake it down so the gravel filters down between the rocks. Question for you, Chris, is that bucket full?
I was going to say yes, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so.
Good, thank you. And that's enough, because you're actually using the same rationale that Paul just did. There's gaps between the rocks. There's littler gaps, but there's still gaps, right? So you can't say it's full in that sense. This next one's for you, Steph. If you're going to take the sand, I'm going to dump the sand on top of the gravel and the big rocks and shake the bucket so it sifts down. Is the bucket full?
No.
Same reason, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Final one to, well, no, I won't do the final one because everybody gets smart with that. I take the water and I pour it into the bucket till it comes up to the rim. Is the bucket full? And I don't ask anybody because there's always somebody says, oh, quantum physics says there's space between atoms. And, I mean, let's just accept from me that for the sake of argument, the bucket's full now, right? Now, let's do it in reverse. Empty bucket, pile of rocks, pile of gravel, pile of sand, jug of water. let's say I pour the same amount of water I've just used first into the bucket. Then I take exactly the same amount of sand I've just used, put that in next. Then I take the amount of gravel that I've just used, put that in next. What happens? This one's for you, Tammy. What happens when I get to the big rock?
It won't fit.
Won't fit. Exactly. So that's my crude analogy for time management. You know, the big rocks are the things that really matter, and they're typically the things you need to put in first. So this is how it goes. If I had 1 year, less than 1 year to live, I would. Everybody, I have never heard anybody not say spend time with family or spend time with loved ones or get rid of that problem that's been in my family. Whatever it is, doing something really substantial at a personal level. And then there's sort of fairly big ticket bucket list type items. They very often have to do with personal things, again, relationships that I've always wanted to go to Paris, whatever it is. Now, you look at that box, you look at what that reveals about you as a person, and you ask yourself what your driving values are. And there's some examples down there. So this shows that I am compassionate, that I have a strong connection with my family, that I want to serve others, whatever it is. I want to become the best version of me. It's almost sort of philosophical at this stage, right? What is your life about? What are you here to do? What's the purpose of this? So the big rocks are the things that you do that help you realize or make your driving values real in the world. So this is the example I did this afternoon. And I'm talking about my practice and the Intrapreneurs program. So I would provide financially for my family. Yeah, everybody else is doing that. I travel. There's particular towns and places that I've been to that I want to go back to. I do some creative writing, but I do that to help others. I wouldn't do that just to sort of indulge myself. And I'd retreat. I'd spend time with myself. That's what I would do if I had a year left. Because of that, I can say that I'm looking at that person as if it was another person. I love and provide for my family. I don't just love them. I want them to eat and have shelter. I'm compassionate. I care for others, and I think life is for living just in this moment. Those are my values. What does that look like then as big rocks? Well, I spend time on sustainable and viable business development. I want to generate money for my family, and I want to generate money to travel. I also want to help others, and I've discovered the way to do that is by teaching. And I also want time for my own stuff. So in my case, that's meditation and writing, which I do alone. Those are big rocks. Now, thinking back to that metaphor, that analogy of the bucket, the big rocks, the gravel, the sand, and etc. I've got to ask myself how much of my life, when I'm trying to plan my time, I'm spending on big rocks like these, and how much I'm spending on sand or gravel, like checking my social media updates or whatever, you know. Maybe that is part of my big rock or whatever. But when I come to time management, I want at least some of my time, some of my life dedicated to the stuff that really matters. Because if I'm not doing that, then ultimately I'm not much good at my job either. Because if you and we've all been in this situation, either ourselves or people around us, people just turn up, do their job and go home. They're not much fun to be with. You've got to ask them you've got to ask yourself why are they doing that. So we're starting at this really high level. We're not starting about the nuts and bolts of what we've got to do in our job. We're starting at this high level and drilling down from the big rocks down to the sand and the water. So the next tool that follows on from this is the major values listed. So the major values I've just described in my personal driving values and my big rocks, how I turn those into long-term, intermediate and short-term goals. Remember, this is the how section. This is where we're talking about action. How do I turn these fancy philosophical ideas down into stuff that I can do this year, this month, and in the longer term? And this is the way I answered those questions. So I want to have a sustainable and a viable business. That's a major value for me because it actually feeds my big rock. If I go right to left, which is actually the way I did this, not left to right, short term this month, I've got to finalise training models for schools. This is Edgeware now. This is me as Edgeware, not Comlink Intrapreneurs. I've got to do it for schools, I've got to do it for intrapreneurs, for you guys, and I've got to do it for coaches. Those are my 3 big ticket items. Intermediate, within this year, I've got to begin commercialisation of this. So it's not just me delivering my training anymore, it's me developing Edgeware as a product. The long-term goals, and here I'm trying to practice what I preach, which is to get to numbers. I really like numbers and dates and deadlines and quantities for actions, and I'll get to more of that in a second. I want to get to a point in a couple of years' time, 3 years' time, where 90% of Edgeware's income is passive. It's coming off the web. I don't need to turn up and spend hours on it. So it's been put on the web, and that means less than 10% of my waking hours is dedicated to the Edgeware business. 90% of my waking hours are dedicated to my big rock. I don't know if I'll get there, but that's the goal. Can you see how the big ticket item gradually starts filtering down to stuff I can do? I've got to create these models to deliver training that is eventually going to create this passive income for me. Why? Because one of my big rocks is getting a business happening that doesn't need me, really, that can provide for my loved ones without me having to be there. Another one of my major values is helping others. So I define my success as a human being, at least partly, as how good I've been for other people. Short term, I've got to get involved. I am involved in this Vitality Village innovation agenda. What is the Vitality Village if it's more than just rental? It's the connections we're making, not only inside Comlink, but with other organisations that we share the space with. Within this year, I've got to create a commercialisation package for intrapreneurs. And outside of Comlink, I've got to create a prospectus of value proposition for schools and for coaches. They're the other customers that I've identified that can use this. Long term, I only want to do this sort of thing, what I'm doing with you, 2 or 3 times a year. And I only want to do it when it really matters, when I really think it can make a difference. Now, I don't know if I'll get there or not, but that becomes part of my long-term visioning. Remember when we did the where, when we did the sort of ooey quiet, think about your future, your desired future? Remember that? That's what I'm kind of getting to with these long-term goals, right? I want time for my own stuff. That's what I identified as a big rock for me. So short-term goals this month, right now, Sundays are writing days and meditation days for me. And so far, so good. That's working. Intermediate goals, two of them. I want to start doing creative writing, for various reasons, and I want to start circulating that and getting feedback from people whose opinions I value. And I want to do at least 1 3-day silent retreat, because that's a big ticket that's so bloody difficult. And actually, part of it is actually telling you about it, so that I'll feel guilty if I don't do it now. That's part of motivation, you know. I mean, motivating yourself is you actually blab it out loud to other people and you think, oh shit, now I've got to do it. But a long-term goal, in terms of big rocks, I'd like to spend 4 weeks of a given year totally alone, on an island, in a cave, wherever it is, just doing stuff in my own head. Now, you will have a different mix, okay? Everybody has a different mix, but it starts with your major values. Now, drilling down from that, we can do an analysis. There's 2 ways you can use this tool number 17. The first way is to actually do a log of a given working day, okay? Whenever you wake up, whenever you go to sleep, hour by hour, what did you do that day? That's the event column. The comment column is about whether that was big rock, gravel, sand, or water, you know? And I'm suggesting to you that if you don't have at least one big rock happening in the top half of your day, then time management becomes problematic, because your day is swamped in gravel and sand really quickly. And you'll find, like in the reverse part of that example I just gave you, that you get to the end of the day, you get to the end of the week, you get to the end of the month, or you get to the end of your life, and you have not done your big rock. You know, you have not done anything about your big rock. That's really important, even when you're just trying to earn money in a business. Because if you're not motivated, if it's not meaningful for you, you will not stick with it. And you will not develop the resilience that you need to learn from your mistakes. Any questions about that? Yes?
Just a question. So this is just for the working hours?
Depends on how you want to use it. You can use it, like I've had people use this for their lives. I've had people use the whole tool set for their life.
Where's earlier? My morning starts at 4:30 a.m.
Well, go for it. And I bet that it starts because you need to hit the gym, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So being physically fit and healthy, I suspect, is one of your big rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was me, I'd be thinking, well, I'm no good to anybody else unless I'm fit myself. You know, if I get sick, I'm no good for anybody else. Anyway.
I don't get sick.
Well, that's because you exercise, because you pay attention to the big rocks. Go for it, you know. I mean, it's tricky, and it's a good question, because the line between you as a person and you as a professional is not as clean cut as we like to think very often, you know. I know that if I'm healthy, physically healthy and mentally healthy, that I am more productive in my job. I'm also a person who's easier to talk to and like and love. Those are the same thing, you know. So, and you get this with small business all the time, and people are saying, well, I'm in it for meaning making as well as money making, you know. What we're trying to avoid, as we see sometimes, unfortunately, is getting to the end of life and looking around and you think, what on earth was that about? You know, not really having an idea how this really brief period in the universe, you know, has meant anything. Really important, not only for yourself, but for your job, in my view. Any other questions?
Michael.
Yes.
On the page with the short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals, are we talking about, when you asked the initial question, what would we do if we had a year to go? Are we answering our own personal response to that, or are we referring more to what our business should be?
Same kind of answer. It depends.
It depends.
Really, the answer, I think, is both.
Yeah.
You know, you're only going to be good for your business idea if you're good for yourself in the first place. So both would be my pat answer. Okay, one more tool. It's a big one. This one is chunky. Don't expect you to have absorbed all of this, but think about it. You've got this recording to go back to and the slides. And I'm happy to unpack this. I think about this sort of stuff a lot, of course. If we were workshopping this, I'd stop now and I'd get you to write 4 lists. This is about your business now. This is not about your life. We've finished time management. This is now one of the how tools, the strategic SWOT. You would have come across, some people would have come across SWOTs: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And I'd stop now and ask you to write 4 lists. In your own time as homework, I suggest you start this next tool by doing exactly that. 4 columns, 4 lists. Now, strengths and weaknesses. I'm just sorry for the really daggy graphics. This is the best I could do. I don't know if you ever tried to write with a mouse. Strengths and weaknesses belong to your internal environment. It's what's on board. Opportunities and threats are what comes from outside. Okay, so when I'm talking about Comlink Intrapreneurs as a product, building this up, what are the strengths on board? What have we already got? You know, well, it's a proven product. This is repeating, right, Steph? This is actually, I've already talked about this a couple times in other tools, but repeating is not bad. It's an accredited course. So you end up with a internationally accredited piece of paper. I've got shitloads of experience doing this. I've got a large network, lots of edgies, people just like you have done exactly the same course, and it's value for money. And I'm in the business of proving that right now. Those are all strengths that I have on board that I'm bringing to this product offer. Weaknesses also on board. I'm not fully automated. And you've already picked up from me that I want to be as passive. I want passive income from this, which means I've got to automate it. I've got to get it online. I've got to find ways of doing that effectively. It only goes, another weakness is it only goes up to Cert 3. So I can't offer you a certificate for a diploma or a degree in this stuff. Might not make so much difference in Intrapreneurs, might make more business, makes more stuff elsewhere. The third and the fourth ones is I'm lousy at marketing and I'm lousy at financing. Those are real weaknesses for the Intrapreneurship project. The opportunities which come from outside, I find myself in a growing market. Health, in aged care, people are getting older. Health is increasingly an issue. We're all freaked out about dementia, etc. And there's also opportunities in people in retirement age and older going into business, being seniorpreneurs. You can imagine, you know, put yourself in the place of a 65-year-old, the pension's getting a bit tight, or your self-managed super isn't paying off as well as you thought it would be. You've always been good at crocheting things. Could I set up an Etsy shop? What would it take to turn that into a little business on the side? That's an opportunity. There's a government program called Cert 3 Guarantee, which actually subsidises participation, the cost in these courses. And I'm working with the Vitality Village, which will have a whole network of people attached to it. These are all opportunities that are coming to me from outside my business, outside my world. The threats, which also come from outside my world, is copycats. Universities and TAFEs are notorious for simply stealing IP and calling it their own. And yeah, with little players like me. People who can do this, touches on one of my weaknesses, entirely online, can actually go to market and compete with me on price, because they don't have to pay people. It's all just machines. And because I'm pretty promiscuous with my intellectual property with these tools, like I'm not going to follow up how you're using these tools in your life or whatever, it's possible that somebody somewhere could pick these up, put their own brand on it and call it their own. So that's a threat to me. Is anybody unclear about internal, external, that sort of division? Cool. So when we get to the tool itself, in the downloadable, in the PDF that you have, you'll see SWOT, strengths, weaknesses up the top, internal, opportunities, threats as the column on the left, external, and I've just written in what I just explained to you. So I start with just writing the list. I think writing the list is easier than getting involved in the tool straight away because it can get a bit confusing. So I've just transcribed what I wrote in those 4 columns into these boxes. Now the magic of the tool, like most of the Edgeware tools, they're mostly matrices, we cross-reference them. So, and I'm after action here, remember? This is how. This is all about what I'm going to do. And this is where I really like TATs, tiny, achievable, tickable targets or tasks. I really like dates, deadlines, quantities, things that you can measure. So I'm going to cross-reference these. How can I use my strengths to make the most of my opportunities? So when I did that and I thought about it, I thought, well, what I can do is commercialize and scale a strategy for this business, and I can do that by February 2020. So on the strength of this experience and the previous one, I can get together with Comlinks Marketing and turn it into a product offering in February 2020 and go out to market. So it's got something to do and it's got a date to do it by. I can create a marketing plan preparatory to that by December this year. So what I'm doing is approaching the opportunity of a growing market and the network I can connect with by using all of the things that I've got, all of the strengths I've got. Is anyone unclear about how that works? Cool. For the next one, how can I use my strengths to overcome or avoid the threats? So my threats, if you remember, are copycats, price competition, and IP infringement, people using my stuff without permission. What I can do to deal with the copycats and with the online price competition is emphasize the mixed delivery nature of this offering. So while this is online, while we do this webinar, it is live. And there is a certain kind of quality that we get out of doing it this way that we don't get by typically watching videos or reading text on a screen. So I'm going to actually emphasize, double down on the mixed delivery quality of this product, which comes from all my strengths, and include that in that marketing plan by December this year. On the IP issue, I'm going to seek some advice from IP lawyers. There's a conversation that Comlink's going through at the moment with fabulously expensive IP lawyers, and I'm just going to slip a couple of questions into that. So I've got 4 actions so far, and I've got 4 actions so far that are based on my strengths relative to my opportunities and threats. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here with weaknesses and opportunities. So how can I use my opportunities to reverse my weaknesses or deal with my weaknesses? I'm going to find a marketing mentor. I'm finally going to find somebody, preferably with experience in not-for-profit, who can give me some advice on marketing. We've got some good people at Comlink, but I need people that have actually been around the block a few times. I'm going to find somebody by December, offer to buy them a coffee every month, and just float these ideas, like the ideas I'm talking about with you. Another way that I'm going to use the opportunity of the Vitality Village is to integrate, as far as I can, the Intrapreneurs program, what we're doing right now outside of Comlink, with our partner organizations, with the other tenants in the building. So I can inspire conversations between you and between them, and new business ideas that come out of that. I haven't got a deadline on that. That's just ongoing because the planning for the Vitality Village is going on right now. So now I've got 6 actions that are coming from this SWOT analysis. And finally, and this is the one that most of us have trouble with, the weaknesses and threats. What happens when weaknesses and threats collide? What happens when something bad happens and it hits me right where I'm weak? What am I going to do about that? And that goes to I've just forgotten the word. Risk analysis. Jesus. Risk analysis. There won't be time for that one in this session. I'll start with a risk analysis next time. This is essentially a risk analysis box. Okay. Price competition is a problem for me, and I'm weak in the fact that I only offer a Cert 3. Some of my competition takes in unis are going to come to the market and be cheaper and claim that they're better. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to look at price. I'm going to be able to, Comlink is going to be able to offer the Intrapreneurs program, I'm guessing 12 times next year, once or twice to Comlink itself, 10 times to other companies, either in the Vitality Village or elsewhere. After that, I'm going to say we can offer it 36 times in a year. Every time it scales up, it gets cheaper to deliver for a variety of reasons. It means that we can review those prices and possibly go to market at a cheaper price. So constantly reviewing the pricing, possibly using that pricing tool I showed you before, becomes something I can do. To deal with my weakness in marketing and financial skills in particular when it comes to this competition, I'm going to have to do a course. I think I'm going to have to do some study with the Australian Institute of Company Directors. I'm going to have to get better at the money in particular, particularly if I stay hanging around Comlink, and it looks like I will. I just need to get better at the money. So that too is something I can do, but I'm not going to do it straight away. I'm going to do it in the middle of next year. So again, I'm hanging a date from these things. So what I've shown you here, what I've shown you here, oh, sorry, don't mean to, is a way of doing a SWOT analysis, which is a really common business tool, and it's a good one, it's useful, but a way of translating a SWOT analysis into an action list, into a to-do list. Actually, a risk analysis, I think I can do this pretty quickly. No, I won't, because we can check out, and I want to finish on time, because that's my promise to you, implicit and explicit. Also in your book now, as we get to the end of the how section, is a page that looks like this. This is a time when it becomes necessary to go back through every single tool we've done so far. In this example, I've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 actions. You know, it might be, that's generally the minimum number of actions people get out of this tool. Sometimes they get 10, sometimes they get 12 actions. But you might remember that in pretty much every tool, whether it's now, where, or how, we've done something, or I've talked somehow about actions. And now it's time to get those things together, to list them all, because now it will be about prioritizing those actions. So I want to suggest to you, it's not only knowing the list of things you've got to do, it's important to know which ones first, which ones you do first, and which ones you emphasize most, which ones you devote most time, resources, energy, grey cells to. So in this example, and the one that follows through from this that we'll get to in the next webinar, you just make a list. And sometimes these will overlap. Like Steph's already mentioned that sometimes she finds herself repeating herself. Like if you actually have two actions that really look very similar to each other, either drop one of them or rewrite them so it includes, rewrite the action so it includes both of those things. So I've just written 1 to 8 here. I've just taken that tool, the outcome of that tool, and transcribed those actions into this. And then I go back where I've written another action, another action, another action. I've gone back to all of the tools since tool 1, and I've looked for any action that's in any of those tools, and I've transcribed those into this page. So what I've ended up with, and very rare for people to end up with more than 32, is up to 32 real actions. And you'll notice in all of mine, there's a date attached. So I'm looking for actions, really the rubber is hitting the road at this point of the process. I'm looking for actions like do makeovers for 50 people by the end of 2020 to prove the case, you know? That's 50 people by a date. Product to 50 people by a date. That is what makes it tickable. I'm not saying something like, check out whether a home makeover is viable. I can lie to myself when I answer that question. I can't lie to myself when I answer the question, this number of people by this date at this price. So that's really the hard part, boiling down these great big ideas that we have into things that are really practical, doable, measurable. And that's where we'll go when we meet again. We'll go into starting to pull all of this stuff together, because this is the end of the how. And by now we've covered now, where, and how. And it's about getting all of these things together into a one-page plan. And then it's about making that, in terms of Comlink, inside Comlink, saleable, so that eventually it turns into the joy of delivering this stuff and making a difference that we can afford. Okay. Yes, Tammy.
Just on this one, Michael, are we listing the actions in priority? What needs to be done first? No.
Just grab them. And the next tool will be about prioritizing. And that is actually the end of the how. I lied to you a little bit. There's still something to do. We're prioritizing them, and then we'll break them into different kinds of actions, because some of the actions are financial, some of them are social, some of them are administrative, and etc. And it's really useful to know what kinds of actions they are as well. And I'll show you how to do that. But you've done shitloads in this session. Like, we've covered heaps of stuff, and you've been very good to pay attention to it all. So it's checkout time. It's really just, as you know, the reverse of the check-in, how I'm feeling now. Any impressions, anything you'd like to share with anybody else, just to get your head out of this webinar and into the real world. Would somebody like to go first?
There's a lot going on with this tool, between pricing, time management, and the action plan. But I think I'll be okay with the pricing side of things. On the others, I've got a lot more thinking to do.
Thanks, Steph.
Christine.
Yeah, coming into it tonight, I feel a lot better now. I'm understanding it. I'm looking forward to this weekend, getting stuck into it. I've got to keep that promise to myself. I can smell my husband cooking dinner. My stomach is going berserk. But thank you. No, really thoroughly enjoyed tonight. Really did. Thank you, Michael.
Throw to somebody, Chris.
Oh, sorry. Paul.
Yeah, I'd like to say thanks again for tonight. I'm looking forward to actually, processing it more as I work through the tools over the next. I can pick up bits and pieces of where it applies to the particular context that I'm working through, but I know that once I start to work it through logically, it'll start to really narrow things down and focus it a bit more. So look forward to doing that. Thanks, Michael. And I'll throw it to Jay.
I actually, some of the last comments actually made me think more. So I was just thinking, Michael, whether you were aware that in that first, when they finish high school, when they finish year 12, that first 12 months, they can do a Cert 3 for free.
Oh.
Only if they do it in that first 12 months.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If they're not going to uni or anything like that. So I was just thinking maybe you should look into that. My son did a Cert 3 and I was very grateful I didn't have to pay for it.
That's cool. I mean, I'm even thinking when Mel's back, we can be thinking about intergenerational stuff that way, you know? Because anyway, that's good. Thanks, Joe. How are you? Are you okay with this stuff?
Yeah, I've just got to do it. And I'm looking forward to our gas group. And I was going to say, Paul, what time did I book it for, anyone? 3 Wednesday.
3 o'clock Wednesday.
And Steph too. Steph, I don't know whether we included you or Jay included you on the invite. I was going to email you after this.
Yeah, we can do the call thing, can't we?
We can. What I was actually going to talk to Steph about was seeing if Steph wanted to come down to the office about lunch, or come up, sorry, about lunchtime, and she can hang out in my space and work on it if she wants to, and we can float in and out until we can all stop work for a minute at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, Mel mentioned it to me when she was in the office, and Jane said that it should be okay for me to go down or up.
That would be good.
And remember, Comlink is ready to give you time off to do this, provided there's enough notice and we can fill in and etc. The company wants to support this stuff, so there's some of it you can do on company time.
So I booked the boardroom and it was available. So
cool. Okay. So who was next? Was Steph throwing to someone? Paul throwing to someone.
I threw it to Jay, and Jay, I'm just saying Tammy
All right.
hasn't spoken yet.
Jay, throw it somewhere.
I'll say Emma.
Okay.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry everyone. Yeah, it's been a long day. I just am enjoying listening around what you're doing and how you're going to use the tools and work through that. The one thing I was going to say was, Steph, you might have felt like it might be a bit of a road bump in your costings, but phase one might be an in-house model to get you the support for the funding to do phase two for more isolated people. So that might be how that actually rolls. So that might be a proofing exercise of it working, then to go to phase two.
Yeah.
Oh, Amanda?
You're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry, another good night. Lots to think about. Good luck with all the tools. I actually feel for you guys this fortnight. There's quite a lot for you to wade through. But once you get into it, they kind of all flow. We're at that kind of point where once you get to this point, it's all starting to make sense and you can put things in. And yeah, I'm while I was talking to you in the last little while, my puppy has knocked over something out there and has been bringing in various items. So I don't know what I'm going to find in the lounge room. So I had to duck in there quickly and kind of mitigate. She'd knocked over the water bowl and there was water everywhere. So I'm just going to go and deal with chaos in a minute. So, Michael.
Thanks.
Oh, Tammy, did you go yet, Tammy? No, Tammy, do you want to go?
I feel like I've talked a lot. I'm loving this. It's exciting to me, and I just want to start. I know I'm not ready, but I want to start. But Michael, can I ask two questions? One is, how long is it expected that our presentation would be to the exec team? And second question is, are we all presenting in front of each other, or is it individual? How does that all work?
What we did last time, and it worked quite well, so I'd like to suggest we do it again, is 5 minutes each. And, you know, people say 5 minutes is too long, I don't need 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes for a reason. Typically, by that stage, you're so excited about your idea that 5 minutes becomes 30 minutes really easily. And boiling it down, simplifying it to 5 minutes is as a useful exercise by itself, because that's typically all anybody will give you to make a decision. People will be prepped, so by that stage you will have uploaded all of these tools, and I'll aggregate those into parcels and give those to people so they've read them ideally before they actually hear your pitch. So your pitch is not about explaining how each tool works. Your pitch, and some of us have heard what Kerry and Michaela at least turned their plan into. Your pitch is really part of your marketing. And we will spend a significant chunk of webinar number 6 on pitch prep. And that's my background's in performing arts, right? So I'm really just coaching you as a director at that stage, and you as a performer. And as we know in marketing, people don't remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. So it's about getting us as excited about your idea as you are. What was the second question?
Are we all doing it in front of each other?
Yeah, everybody's in the same room. We're just in the boardroom at Comlink. We give each other feedback and we follow through. Like the first group is going to meet next week, I think, just to hang and exchange some ideas.
Yeah, cool.
Do we do it in front of each other? Like,
if you want, that can be part of a gas group.
Okay.
You can rehearse it. Last time, a couple of people did that. I think in pairs or threes. They actually did a physical rehearsal in the boardroom before they pitched. Like Michaela was, you know, having puppies, like just she was so freaked out. But you know, we saw what she turned out with. It came up with, which was just unreal, you know. And the distance she travelled to be able to do that was remarkable, you know. And that then created social capital, incidentally. Like everybody wants Michaela's thing to happen and they want Michaela's name on it, right? Everybody, which means it will. Okay, sorry to run over time. I do try to finish on time. Any final comments or whatever? Otherwise, we'll knock off. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Enjoying this.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy
Bye,
dinner,
everyone.
Chris.
Thank you. I was coming. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.